Hello. As I was standing here, something occurred to me. Hey Kaz.
Hello.
Is this a new episode?
I think it might well be.
And what are we doing?
We're covering up the rear.
So, stick around if you want to see us covering the rear.
Of the truck.
If you've been following along, then you might know that the previous episode was supposed to be us cladding this in sheet metal and thus building what would essentially become our garage. However, it came to our attention that maybe we need to do some more groundwork, or flatbed work as it's known in the business, because we found that things weren't as stiff as they should be, and we like stiff.
That's what I said.
So hopefully in this episode we'll end up with some garage floors and all of those things. Let's see what happens.
We've spent a lot of time figuring this out. The rear of the habitat is quite a complex shape, and we've decided we're going to make each side out of 3 separate panels. We're going to make a front panel out of thinner material, and then the rear stroke floor panel and the wall panel out of thicker. Part of the reason why this has taken us so long is because all of the box section that we're using, it has a radius, and because we want the sheets to sit flat, we've been trying to figure out how much extra material we need to add to allow for that bend. I think we're about ready to start cutting now.
Here we go.
We've now cut the piece of metal for the garage sides. We've cut 2 pieces for the front and this side of thinner material, and we need to bend those. We've cut the 2 walls, and then the backs and the side bits, which also needs to be bent. So the next thing for us to do now is to get bending. Comedy cameraman.
I'm bending my knees.
This is where Yoko's going to score. If you've seen our previous video where we made the front entrance, you'll know that we really struggled to bend the 2.5mm sheet steel. So Yoko's going to score it.
Giggity! We've set up my homemade sheet metal bender thingy. We also clamped a bunch of things onto the table, and the things are like squares and stuffs and other technical terms. My head is obviously focused on this one rather than the terminology. The point with those thingies over there, the squares, is that we can put the other side sheet in and we hopefully get the same bend. Here we go. Forward one. There we go. 46.5, which is good because it's easier to remove angle than to add it later on. So this way it'll clamp tightly onto the side. So okay, second patient. Okay. that down. It's about 42. And now we need to mark out the fronts and bend them. It's not perfect, but it'll do. We have spent several hours, 4, 5 hours, 3, 2, I have no idea, trying to finesse the 3 panels into the correct spot, and it's looking really good. We have the wall and the front are sitting really well, so that's not a problem at all. However, when we put the back, that one was a little bit moody, but I think we've come to the conclusion that if we tack it together, then we are pretty much there in the sense of that we can actually have a proper trial fit to see if it actually fits in there, all the parts. And this edge of the back and bottom probably needs a little bit of angle grinder massaging to be perfect fit. Another lovely day here in the Empire of Dirt. What I've done this morning is that I took all the 3 panels from the passenger side and I compared them to the driver's side and made some marks on there, so I don't have to do the work we did yesterday all over on both sides. And then I have now put the back bottom piece onto the wall piece, and I have clamped down those 2 squares there, and their job is so that I can push this piece of metal up against there, and now I'm going to add a few tack welds to this. My inner perfectionist is screaming that I should do this with a TIG welder because that is nicer, and everything that is nicer is better. The pragmatist is saying that it is easier to grind off some fat MIG weld blobs from there if things go wrong. So I think I'm going to listen to the pragmatist, and I used a MIG welder just to squirt some molten metal onto there, and then it should be okay. Maybe I'll TIG weld the rest of it just to please both of them. We have spent what feels like an eternity trying to make the wall and the rear / floor fit. I think we finally have it fitting well enough. The issue we've been facing is that not everything is straight. We build something straight and then we need to figure out why it doesn't fit. And it takes a long time to verify what we've built, what we built on the truck and what we built in the box, that is, and then try to figure out which one of those has the discrepancy. And then when we finally find some form of a discrepancy, we need to come up with an action. In this case, we think this one isn't super parallel with this one, which means that we have cut a little bit off here on the wall so that it sits a little bit higher. And I also think we did a little bit of a measuring error at some point somewhere when it comes to this plane or this direction or something like that, because we are now sort of a little bit further back than we should be, but it's okay. So now when we know how to actually force it into there, and we're pretty happy with the fitment of the wall and the side slash bottom. It is now time to put the front on, and I have clamped it up here according to that line there and the edge there, and we have tons of clamps and magnets in there to try to keep it perpendicular 90 degrees. I have clamped this one to the table, and then this one on top of that, and then this one to hold it all straight because the other ones aren't long enough. Anyway, it's ready for a bit of bzz action now, and then we can put it on the truck again and see how much we have made it miss. That bucket is now fitting well enough. There's still a few places where we could make it fit a little bit better, but I think we can leave that for the final fitment, or when it's actually going in. The front is now in there, and yeah, it's fitting quite well. It's not super duper accurate, but with a bit of clamps and persuasion I think it'll be just fine. We now need to do the other side, and then taillights. Then they can be fitted after that. So hopefully that one will go in a little bit quicker, thanks to the experience of doing that. Annoyingly slow day, but end result good. Top of the morning to you. I have now spent some time fitting the panels into here. So the front panel and the side panel has been massaged and gently persuaded to cooperate. The front panel here has had a corner rounded there, and this has been cut at an angle to match the outrigger thing, and the side panel has had this notch massaged into place there so that it fits up under the outrigger. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this the back and floor panel and tack it to the side panel, and then we're going to go over the same rigmarole as we did yesterday, i.e. trying to convince those two to fit. I am going to be a little bit blunter than yesterday because it ended up just being, well, a lot of thinking, and then at the end of it quite a lot of brute force. So I'm expecting this one to behave the same. But tack welding next. I didn't show much of this in the previous session because we were basically just scratching our heads and looking confused. So I'm going to stop the head scratching and just look confused now. The thing we did on the other side applies to this one too. At the moment this bend is sticking too far down there, and the solution to that is to cut the wall a little bit at the back, taper it a little bit. I think it needs about 4mm total at the back cutting off to make this one flush, and that also means that this gap that is here will be smaller. I cut this angle here, this cut earlier, and I just remembered now that this piece of steel might not be exactly the same angle and location as that one. However, I think once it is raised up a little bit, it'll be okay. I'll probably also tack weld the front in because that worked quite well last time on the other side. Cut that and put the front in, and making a lot more progress today than we did yesterday because we didn't know what we were doing. And there is Goldie. The most talkative cat in the world. I cut the wall off, tapered 4mm at the rear to the front, and I cut the floor off to match the line of the front wall. And now I have tacked the easy bit here, which is that wall, and now I'm trying to do the back wall here. And I guess because I'm a bit of a complete noob to this, I find these clamping situations always quite interesting and intriguing. Because I need to clamp up high here, I have got this 40 by 80 piece of steel. It's sitting on the table and it is clamped to this weird square, monster square adjustable fireball tool square, which is clamped to the table. That gives me a 90-degree, hopefully, surface there, and then I put the two minion squares in there because I need to clamp big piece of metal to the 90-degree, and then I can clamp this on top here, right? I hope that makes sense. So 90 degrees, a riser and two spacer blocks there to make sure that they are sitting well. The last piece of the puzzle is that I clamp the framer square here just to make sure that this wall is also 90 degrees. And the final piece is that I'll clamp it all down to the table so that it doesn't sway or anything like that. So hopefully this will give me some sort of precision, but yeah. Sometimes these things take long and you have to use your old noggin to figure things out, but it's quite fun when it works out. With a bit of clamping and force and violence, this one sits pretty nicely in here. I need to bevel some edges and finesse it a little bit, but nothing major. Once that is done, I can start to fully weld both sides. And then once that's done, then tail lights. But we don't have them yet. They are loitering somewhere in Sweden. Let me fully weld it and we will see what happens next. You wouldn't believe it regardless anyway, so might have to start work on the top, waiting for the taillights. Anyhow, it's looking good. the last session we left them like this. One of the sides is welded, the other one is just tack welded. So I'm sure you can figure out what I need to do next. The galvanized saddlebags are now pretty good. I TIG welded the outside of it, and then I used the spatter maker 5000 there to put some spatter in my hair and on my body, and also some pigeon feces into the corners of the seams there. That way there's a little bit extra meat there, or actually steel, because steel is better than meat in this case. I also used the TIG welder to run this folded bead here so that it's not as thin anymore. And the thing that's left to do is that this corner up here, this one here, needs to be capped, because the 40 millimeter thick bar is come here, so we don't want that hole there. Then it's time to do the top bit here, which is I think I got it figured out, but yeah. Anyway, enough for tonight. With the side tubs lowering almost done, before I hot metal glue them onto the truck, I like the idea of the axis here. So the next thing that I want to do is I want to start work on the enclosing and recessing of the spare wheel into the box here. In practice, that means that I need to put the wheel back up there, and then I need to start figuring out how to actually manufacture that bit. Before I get to the wheel, I have a delivery there that needs what apparently is called deboxification. Thanks, Quinn, for letting me onto that. Apparently this is something that all the young kids do these days, so to stay hip, is that what it's called? These, anyway, to stay with the young people, yo, let's deboxificate that one and see what's in it. Right, let's see what's in the box. See if it's wow! Tail lights! They're already turned on. That's amazing. Let's see what they actually are. Look at that! It's amazing. All-in-one LED construction. No idea if they're going to work or not, but they need to be fitted to the truck. Yeah! Anyway, there you have it. Apparently this is the new thing, to do deboxification. With apparently you need to use a much more absurd knife than this. This is just a practical knife, not like a sword or something. Anyway, end of deboxification. Yes. It seems like the deboxification stuff got me a little bit excited, so I couldn't help myself. I had to answer a question. The ideal situation to mount the taillights on the truck would be that I incorporate a threaded stud on the box, and then I open up the taillight and I put them on, and I tighten up the nut from the inside of the taillight, and then I enclose the taillight back up so that it is waterproof and all that stuff. So I needed to open up the taillight because they come like this. They have a stud on the back here, and or they have two studs on the back here. They are M8s, and that's all really good. And they're also stainless. All the bolts and screws on these taillights are stainless, so very pleased with that. But when I open it up, it is quite clear that there's 8 bolts, 8 screws on the back, and then there's 4 on the front, 1 on each corner. And inside the taillight, the studs are actually bolts that go into these recessed places there to hold prevent them from twisting. but because of the limitation of that there are the 8 screws on the back, it means that there's no way that I could enclose this from the inside only, from the front or rear, from the lens side, to be clear. So I've had a bit of a think. The bottom line is basically that I need to make a bracket for this. Not all is lost, but slightly less than ideal. Curiosity satisfied, I can now get on with the spare wheel enclosure situation.
Much later.
Today has been a bit of a frustrating day. It feels like all we've done is just scratching our heads, measuring and being frustrated about stuff. We've been trying to figure out how the floor here is going to be positioned and built, and then the 45-degree part of it, and then the wheel well, and then the back wall there. And the tire itself isn't in the middle of this surface, so the floor is going to be higher. If you think that this is the tire and the middle of the tire is here, then the floor is not there, the floor is somewhere here. So we can't just cut a half circle on a piece of metal and bend it where the half circle starts, because that would make it go too far up and the circle wouldn't be aligned with the tire that's on the truck. Yeah, just a very frustrating day. Hopefully this will yield some stuff later on in the build. And it's now, as you can see, getting a bit dark. The sun just popped down behind the mountain, so I'm gonna call it a day and hope I'll find my zen somewhere. I've spent a considerable amount of time cleaning that sheet up. It's destined to be the floor and the uppity bit on the in front of the tire. So the next thing I need to do is I need to mark out exactly where the half circle is going to go, and then I'm going to start cutting that. Okay, lads and lassies, that there is going to be the round thingy that is going to be welded around that bit, and that bit that's going to go there. I thought I had metal cutting blades for the jigsaw, and I'm glad I didn't, because that allowed me to cut these with the angle grinder and a cutting blade, and that worked really well. I managed to get it really accurate, and there was no problems with it at all. I don't think I would recommend using the angle grinder if you need a positive negative convex concave half circle, but if you need one, then definitely, or if you can just do the offset second cut a little bit offset, then that would probably work really well too. This is 1mm steel, so I think the jigsaw would have tore it up quite badly and maybe it warped it a bit. The angle grinder worked really well, and I was able to get the cut really well. You probably saw in the time lapse that I was using a compass, and the compass is nothing more than I got a piece of aluminium, that I drilled 2 holes in with the correct diameter. So that was it. Now we need to do the bend on the one that goes on the top of the floor. So we're going to assemble the sheet metal folder and then do that, and then we'll see where it goes from there. As you can see, the piece of sheet metal is now bent. Not the way we wanted to bend it, but you know, you make do what you can. And next time, memo to self, build an even bigger sheet metal bender, because the one you thought was stupidly big wasn't stupidly enough big. Anyway, so there it is, somewhere between 40 and 50 degrees. It'll do for now. I think I can finagle the correct angle of the dangle later. But right now, what I would like to do is I want to cut a hole in the sheet metal so that the pulley and the wire can stick up through there. And that basically means that I can then move this sheet into the correct position. I've marked out about a 30mm slit here. I'm going to use the angry grinder to cut a hole there. So marked a bit of a thing on the top here. When I pushed the steel up against the winch and the pulley, the wire, it didn't seem very central. So can we just keep that between us? Let's see what it actually is. You know, more organic than expected, but hey. Last session I was working on cutting this hole. As you can see, this is the garage floor and the thing that covers the rear spare wheel there. The issue I'm having is that this is obviously sticking up here, and I need to be able to position this sheet metal in the exact position, and at the moment there's stuff touching here, namely the bolts for the spare wheel. The more I cut out of this sheet, the more complicated it's going to be to put it back, because it kind of needs to be waterproof. So I'm trying to make the holes as small as possible and only cut where I actually need it now, and then later on covering it all up. The first task today therefore is to cut this hole into such a shape that this sheet metal is aligned forward to back and side to side. Let's do it! Here's a little tip for you. Might come in handy one day. If you are like me at the moment, trying to position a sheet metal side to side, in this case very accurately, you scribe a line and the sheet metal should be on that line, right? But if the sheet metal is over the line and you, just like me, you can't see through metal, there's a bit of a problem. You don't know how much more it needs to go, especially in this case where I'm trying to actually make a hole to make it fit in the right position. So to help this, I have scribed a V. So now the line looks like a K. Anyway, with the V shape there, and if the sheet metal is over the line, I can judge how far off it is by basically seeing how far apart the lines on the V are. And when they meet at the point, that's where the line is, and I know it's all tickety-boo. This is now in a good position. I have centered it in the center there, scribed a mark which matches the center line of the flatbed subframe thingy. I have put these bolts with washers on here. They are all touching apart from the second one here, which is like 0.3 of a millimeter out, so I'm gonna call that okay. That means that this piece of steel is now okay. It fits where it should fit, and there is nothing touching around the center there. Now don't worry about the shape of those holes. They will be covered obviously, but once they're covered, I'm going to cut off the excess, and I'm going to make a cover that suits my fabric cobbling skills and abilities. So I don't know what it's going to look like yet, but once it's tack welded into place, probably from the top here, it is going to be hollowed out from the bottom. This has taken a long time, and 3 or 4 trial fits and all that stuff, so this is the part that there's no point in filming because you'll be bored anyway. The next step with this is going to be that I'm going to start tack welding the spare wheel well onto it. As you saw from the time lapse, that's what I was doing yesterday. It was very dark when I finished, so I didn't film us putting it on, but let's do that now so you can see what it's all about and how it's supposed to go. So the shower cap is now sitting on top of here. I'm actually quite surprised because when we slot it in like this, it is smack bang on in the middle there. It fits really well. I mentioned that I put these bolts and washers in here. I'm going to remove the washers and let me show you why. If I take a straight-ish edge and I put it in this plane, this bar here, the temporary bar, is already in that plane. But if I do this one here, you can see that the shower cap moves up a little bit. It's not very much. What I think is happening is that the whole thing is pushed forward just a little bit too much. The way to verify that and see how it should fit is to remove the washers and see if it goes back a little bit more. And then if this edge here can be exactly parallel with these edges, then we're on for a winner there. When I welded this bar on here, it was to help with the building of these other parts here. It got nothing to do with this shower cap, the enclosing of the spare wheel. Therefore, I have spot welds in here behind these ones. The problem with that is that the sheet that is supposed to go here is oversized because of the curvature of these bars. If I were to make the sheet the exact width as between the bars, then there would be about a 3mm gap on each side of it. So the sheet is actually bigger so that it can kind of lie flat here. And the problem with that is obviously that it can't go in between this temporary bar and this one. So the solution is to angle grind a little bit off these spot welds here, the tack welds. By leaving this in place and clamping these onto here, I can establish a flat plane there so that the back of the Mog will be completely flat. Apologies if that doesn't make any sense. It makes sense inside my head, and that's a messy place. You don't want to be there. I have clamped these pieces of metal here, one on that side and one here. That means that the arch is now resting in 4 places on these pieces of metal here. That gives us one plane that way, and that's how we want it. I removed the washers from here, but the sheet metal needed to go even further forward, so the bolts don't do anything anymore. That's okay, because that plane there is the most important one. So next step is to attach that piece of metal there, the round bit, onto this round bit. Easy peasy, squeeze the lemon. I've set this whole thing up here now on the table. I have put the sheet metal clamped onto the table there, and then the wheel well is here and the floor is here. In here I have some magnets. The idea is I push them towards the wall there, and that is now pretty tight there, So I can put a tack there and I can push the magnets further. And I've also weighted it down so that hopefully it should sit flat on the table. So that's the plan. Let's see how it goes. Bzz, bzz, bzz. Whilst I have been playing with the hot metal glue gun on the welding table, Kaz has spent one time rust converting and sanding and grinding and primering the new parts of the truck at the tail here. Some of this paint is going to be ground off because of welding, but it's better to cover it all now so that we have all the nooks and crannies covered and then grind off where we need it. That's what the spare wheel well looks like at the moment. I fully welded both of the seams, so hopefully it's now waterproof, and then I ground them down a bit. So the next challenge for me is now to get it onto there with that bar in place. And once that is done, I then need to start covering up these holes. Anyway, that's it for today. We're both knackered, so time to chill out. I don't know how many times I've fitted it, but the best solution seemed to be to slide it down along the 45-degree bars there. As you can see, it's fitting really well. I put the bolts back in here with some washers in it, and that means that it's now straight. And to my surprise, the back here is also flush with the bars. And that means that I now think that it is time to cover up those holes there. What I need to figure out is how much space there needs to be around that sticky up bit. I need to be able to get my hand in there from the underside so that I could potentially change the roller or do other service and maintenance stuff there. So the first thing is to figure out roughly how big a bulge we need there. And after that I'm going to start cutting up some pieces of metal and hopefully shape something onto there. We'll see where this leads, as usual. I've drawn some lines here, and the idea is that my hands should fit in underneath there so that I can service these parts. I've got a few places here that are very close from the underside, and I'm not very happy about that, but yeah, that's a discrepancy in the manufacturing process by some lazy git on the assembly line. That would have been me. I think the best way to approach this is to simply bend one piece of steel that goes up and down, and then I will cut it so that it slopes on the sides so that it reaches just beyond these two holes, and that way we should have a fairly simple design that doesn't take up too much space. I've also put a 20mm spacer block here just to keep my head in check, that I remember that the spare wheel carrier moves separately from the floor here. That's the plan at the moment. I did some cardboard aided design, and I basically came up with this thingy here that then has got two pieces of this on the side. So this one goes over the wheel, the pulley, like that. But I also made it narrow at the top, you know, because complicated. And now I need to cut this in a straight line, but I bent it because otherwise I would have to cut it in a bent line. And then I was thinking, how do I get a straight line onto a bent surface? I know that the difference between this edge and this edge to this edge here, where the top of the bend is 30mm. So I got this laser that I put here, right? Now another way to do this is to just raise the pen so that the nib is 30mm off the ground, and then you can just scribe it like that. Sometimes your brain makes things more complicated than they need to be. But anyway, it was fun to try. Yeah, that was easier. I'm gonna put the laser back now. So here's the hump. That should go to the front of the truck, so. And then this notch here should be at the back. So the idea is that this goes in there like so, with a little bit of a angle. Now I've never welded anything like this before, so I'm sure it'll be fine. Bzz, 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 bzz. So I actually took my own advice and I trial fitted it there before welding it, and yeah, it'll be alright. There might be a little bit fendangling around here, but I think it's time to at least tack weld it together and give it another try or so. But yeah, well, that didn't go too badly. With a bit of pressure, it sits really well. So I am now going to fully weld the inside, and then hopefully we can tack it on. Ready?
Yes.
As you probably figured, I made the hump for the big hump, but because of losing daylight, I kind of wanted it tack welded onto here as quickly as possible so I can fully weld it tomorrow, because we're taking this off for tonight. But yeah, it turned out well, and yeah, it's now fitted here. The hump is welded on there, or tack welded on, so the next thing I need to do is fully weld that. But I also need to get rid of this hole here. Let me show you a better angle. This one here. That hole is there due to excessive organic engineering. In other words, I didn't need to cut it, but I cut it because I thought I needed to. So I need to cut out a piece of steel that goes in that hole and then tack it into place, and I think it's probably a good idea to cut that first and then fully weld all of it together. Once it's all welded together, I need to get rid of this excess here, because this is not supposed to be here. As you can see on the zinc fumes and the whiteness there, that's pretty much the stuff that I need to cut off. I now have a piece of steel cut up to there. There's some magnets on the underside sort of holding it parallel there and level. So I'm now going to get a couple of tack welds on there and then see if I could, you know, do something about little edge plastics up there or whatever. Time for the hot metal squirt gun. So we covered up Richard William Johnson there, and now I'm going to cut this piece out and grind away some of the evidence as usual. So the hump is there, and the non-hairy saddlebags are over there. There is still some stuff to do, but let me start from the beginning. This one is fitting really well. It's sitting flush, the hump is there, and all of that stuff. That's really good. However, I had Kaz do some maths about the movement that is happening here. So I need to double check that. I might have to add more complicated shapes to that. One thing that I kind of had not thought about, again shows that in organic engineering, trial fitting may reveal a lot of things that you couldn't figure out. I was thinking about this part here that is basically coming straight on the big bar there, that I need to finesse it, and this part here might have a curve and things like that. And then I realized, well, because this panel is up against that one, this now sits completely flush there. So all I have to do is weld the seam here and weld the seam up there, and now we then have the perfect half circle here. It'll look aesthetically better, and it's easier because I don't have to screw around with making it fit. We have another gorgeous day here, a lot of weather, so that might cause a little bit of issues. Yesterday's calculations by Kaz, she was doing some sciencing, figured out that the space between the spare wheel holder and the underside of the garage floor isn't really enough. There's a large chance we could get away with it, but there's also a small chance that the spare wheel holder might actually hit the floor, the underside of the floor of the garage. And the problem with that is that if it hits it, it makes a dent, and the dent will probably crack the thin 1mm thick skin, which means that the skin will be broken and therefore water will be let in there, and the water will be let in under the insulation at the back, in the garage, under everything, with the rear wheel spray just at the right spot. In practice, that would mean that we probably won't know that for a long time. It's a little bit of a tough choice to make, but I need to cut a little bit off here. We need about 20mm space. We have 20-ish on one and 15-ish on the other. So yeah, it's a lot of effort for very little space gain, but it has to be done. Apart from cutting the tops off here and welding a little bit of steel back on it and then covering up the whole mess with some more paint, I have also decided to put a bar here. Let me show you why. This here is the garage floor, and I hope you can see it, but it's got more lumps than Dolly Parton's mattress. So by welding in this bar in about this position on the underside on the truck, I can then spot weld this part here, and hopefully we can get this a little bit flatter. First things, cut those tops off, weld stuff on, and I was saying about the weather, I hope that the shielding gas is not going to be blown away too much. So it's at this stage of the project where I'm usually very annoyed and impatient. It just feels like things are just taking so long, and I just want it done as soon as possible. I know the problems, I know how to solve them, I just want it finished. However, there's still a lot of fiddling to do, so let's stop complaining and get on with stuff. Yeah. Getting on with things is usually how things get done. Here's a question I get all the time, like every day. No, I don't. Is how do you get your CAD template so accurate? Now here's a trick I've stole from someone else, so you can steal it from me. First, you get your Fiskars brand scissors. They're magnetic a bit, and then you create a kind of a rough template. You obviously start with a brand new CAD file, so you kind of put it down like that, and in this case I have a lip there, so I'm just going to try to match that lip. Yeah, that would do, but we can do a little bit better, like so. Yeah, so now when you have a basic CAD file ready to go, you take the CAD template cloner Now the key here is that you need to keep it in one place. Try not to hit your fingers. There we go. Now you have this. So now you can just take your Fiskars brand scissors and cut out the outline. If you hammer this edge really hard and you haven't rounded it off as I have on this one, you can actually use the template maker there to cut the actual template into. You don't actually have to use your scissors anymore because the edge will actually break it. So once you compress the CAD file a bit, you get that, and you can now finesse it a little bit, but that's pretty much good to go. It's at least good enough to cut out of thicker steel, and then you can make sure that it actually fit, because usually the thickness is different and three-dimensional stuff is usually three-dimensional. So I don't know, there's a tip CAD making, CAD template making thing for it. Ah, don't forget, label it. Got this crossbar clamped in place. I obviously cut it and cleared off some of the paint here, so I'm going to weld it in now. I've also got the plates for these two cut and shaped, ready to go. However, I'm going to do this one first and I'll show you the other ones. I've just added a little bit of hot melt metal onto here with the Spattermaker 5000, and now I'm going to repeat that but on these plates. Here's this one sitting there, and then the other one sitting there. I'm just going to use some magnets to hold them in place whilst I tack them, and then I'll fully weld them. And then all the plates are now burnt in. You know, we want to be like the cool kids here. So now I'm going to get the rotary eraser and get rid of any evidence.